everyone, welcome back to Feather Stitch House. My name's Rebecca and each week on this channel I upload videos about embroidery and textile art to help you get creative. We're in week 2 of our September Winging It project, and last week we started thinking about harvest time, the end of summer and the beginning of autumn. We focused on the colour yellow or gold, and we created a background for a slow stitch interpretation of this time of year. Now, as if on cue, the weather here in Lincolnshire where I live has taken a distinctly bleak and autumnal turn. It's been really grey, overcast, misty and quite cold really for the time of year, and so I thought we might need a little bit of cheering up. So this week we're going to take our inspiration from sunflowers, and we're in particular going to explore texture. So you'll need some textured fabrics, some yarn, some beads, and we're going to start off by using a small embroidery hoop. It's not essential, but if you have one, it will really help. So gather all your bits and pieces and let's get stitching.
Okay, this is where we left it last week. We made our fields of gold background using rectangles of various fabrics in shades of gold, and then we did our first little bit of slow stitching. So we did these running stitch lines, pulled them a little bit tight to create this rippled puckered effect. We created a area of seed stitch just to break up that large section there and blend these two fabrics together, just overlapped there. Then we did our patch stitches, these uneven straight stitches around the edge, and a bit of blanket stitch. So we're actually going to mostly put this to one side today and work in a little hoop. So this is just a 4-inch bamboo hoop. I've put some natural linen, but it doesn't matter what fabric you use because we won't really be able to see it. So what we're going to try and do is create a motif to sit probably around about here on our background. So one of the things that I've been really enjoying this week is sunflowers, seeing sunflowers in people's gardens while I've been out and about. We didn't grow any ourselves this year. I have bought some and they're brightening up my living room. It's taken a very grey and autumnal turn this last week with everybody going back to school, so I thought we would brighten up our week by creating some sunflowers, and we're going to play around with texture. I'm just going to move this to one side for a moment. So I've set up my hoop. I've drawn a circle that is, I think it was this one that I drew around, so that's 66 millimeters in diameter, somewhere around 6.5 centimeters in diameter. That will do. And I've just put in spokes by eye, so I've divided it into quarters. These circle templates are useful because they've got the halfway markers, the sort of north, south, east and west, so you can mark those in and then join up the lines across, and then I just rotated it and did the same again to put in some lines. So I've got that set up. I've grabbed some wools out of my stash. These are shades of brown. So I've got this is 100% wool. It's got lots of kind of flecks of fibres in, and then I've got this wool which I think is acrylic, and this is like, it's almost like a rope. It's lots of fibres twisted together. Hopefully if I show you the end you'll be able to see loads of fibres. It's almost like a stranded cotton, and you could, I suppose in theory, separate these strands out and stitch with them. And then this one is definitely acrylic. This is more of a black brown. It's very dark, very chocolatey in tone, and that's a different texture again. So you can see I've got different thicknesses of yarn and different textures of yarn, and that's what we're going to work with. I've also got my threads from Studio Flax that I can work with. I think I'm going to start off with this one, which we used last week, and I've also got my tweeds. Now I showed you these last week. I've got a selection of bits of tweed and corduroy. So what I'm looking for today are fabrics with texture. I've got a little scrap of felt as well that I can bring in. So anything that's textural or with a fairly subtle pattern, that's going to work really well for what we're going to do today. So let's make a start by putting some spokes in. Right, I've come up on the outside edge of my circle, and I've done that because I don't want that knot at the centre, because it's just going to get in my way. My needle's going to pass through the centre so many times that I don't want it to cause a problem. So I'm just going through that central point to make my first spoke, and then I can go back out to the edge. I'm just going to work round clockwise, back out to the edge and down at the centre. This is what annoys me about working in a hoop. So we're just going to put all these spokes in and work our way around. Now I've got an even number of spokes here, which means I am restricted in the kind of wheel that I make, because a woven wheel where you go under one spoke and over the next requires you to have an odd number of spokes, otherwise it doesn't work. So we're going to do a whipped wheel. I don't think I'll give myself enough thread here. This part is quite thread hungry because obviously we've got the length of the spokes on the back as well. Okay, there we go. So I've got all my spokes in. They're pretty taut, and I'm just going to finish that off on the back to secure it. Now, because we're working with wools and yarns, you might benefit from getting hold of one of these if you can. So this is a child's weaving needle. I got this in a child's weaving kit. If you haven't got one, don't worry. If you've got like a wool needle or a bodkin or something like that, that would work, but you could also do this with a safety pin. Now I'm not going to worry about the end. I'm just going to go for it. We can snip it off at a later date if it's protruding too much. So I'm just going to pull my wool through underneath a spoke, and I want to make sure my yarn loops away from me, and I'm going to go under that spoke again. So that's the spoke I've just been under, but I'm also going to go under the next spoke as well, and I'm just going to hold that end while I pull through. So what we've got is a little back stitch over that spoke. Alright, so loop the yarn away from me, so I'm always coming over the top, back over that spoke there and underneath it, and then underneath the next spoke, and should be alright with my yarn end, but I'm just going to hold it just in case, and I'm going to try and pull across the circle, because that way my yarn is going to pull into the centre. So back over the spoke I've just gone under it and under the next one. So we're always going back one, forward two, and we're going to pull back across the circle to tighten our stitch. So back over the spoke, underneath it and under the next one, pull through and pull through to the centre, and you kind of need to go round once before the spokes fully behave themselves. So back over the spoke, under 2, and I've come unthreaded, look. So once you've been round once, the spokes will be separated and sitting where you want them to be, because they'll all have a stitch over them. So this bunching in the centre that we're getting won't carry on for too long. Okay, and I believe we're back to the start. So what you can do with this end is you can either tuck it underneath, so just hook it from behind with a needle. You could, if you've got a thinner yarn, you could bring it through the fabric. You can trim it off if you want to. I think I'm going to leave it for a minute. I will trim it off, but I'm going to leave it for a minute until I'm happy that my yarn is nice and tight and it's not going to unthread. So I'm just going to go around again, and I'll probably go until I've run out of yarn, and then I will swap in something different. And what we're making here is the centre of a sunflower. So we're going to make a sunflower to add to our piece. Now I think this panel's been quite popular judging by what's happened to the video. It's flown and there's been lots of lovely comments. Lots of people have been waiting for a yellow panel. We did use some yellow back in March for our spring flowers, but it's not a colour I use very often, and I really don't know why that is, because I don't dislike yellow. I think I used to, maybe. I think, if I'm honest, I used to really dislike yellow. I found it a colour that's quite annoying, and I do find it surprising how we can have emotional responses to colours. So the colour I dislike most, I wonder if you can tell. I'm not going to tell you. If you've been around for a long time, you'll know, but I wonder if you can tell from the pieces that we've done which colour I really dislike. I think you'll probably be able to tell my favourite colour, that's green. But I wonder if you can tell which colour I really struggle with. I don't like it. I actually go as far as to say it makes me angry. Is that possible? Can a colour make you angry? I don't know. It does though. So I have quite a visceral reaction to it. Drop a note in the comments if you can guess which colour it is. So yeah, yellow, I didn't like it. The thing that changed my mind was back in 2022 when we started Winging It and we were doing the Winging It book. The whole of March was yellow. If you've never seen this, all the videos are still there. We made the cover in the run up to Christmas. So this was our 2022 project, and we started with monochrome and straight stitch, and January was a 5-week month, so we did a sort of applique. In 5-week months we did a skills project, we did applique, and then February was cold colours and we did laced stitches. So this was our March page, so each week we did a little tiny panel and then we put them together into a page and then made a little label for the pages, and gradually through the year our book grew and formed. And there's a playlist that shows you how I put the book together, because this is a book that kind of grows with your project. I just made it up. You can see it's kind of laced. I've made up the system for making the book because I don't like it when books are all squished together at the spine and then splay out. And this was our March page. So our laburnum tree had little dangles on it made out of a textured thread, and this was all based around loop stitches, so fly stitch, feather stitch, blanket stitch, chain stitch. So we've got some little chain stitch laburnum blossoms on here and some bugle beads. These were our daffodils made out of blanket stitches and fly stitches. Chain stitch stems, that's hard to say, and then we did bird houses, bit of applique, did some whip, but I didn't like this one. It actually says home sweet home, but you can't read it because I didn't have a dark enough yellow. And then each month we did a live stream and we did some fabric manipulation and made little flowers, flower petals on a slow stitched background. Loved that one. And doing that page made me fall in love with yellow, and so I've not really had an objection to it since, but I still don't use it. I think it's habit. That was a bit of a meander, wasn't it? A bit of a dalliance. Right, I'm just going to keep going with this and I'll come back when I change thread because it might help you to see how I incorporate a different colour. So I'm just going to keep going round until I've run out of yarn, and then we'll add in another colour. Okay, here we go. Here's my wheel so far. It's really dark. I wonder if I can get it a bit closer so that you can see the texture. I don't know whether you're going to be able to because of the contrast. Let me have a little play. If I brighten it up, it's too bright really, but hopefully you can see we've got these ridges that have formed along the spokes just to add lots of texture. I've got rid of my end at the centre. I've done it in the way I'm going to show you. So I've got a normal needle here and I'm just going to twist up the end of my yarn and thread it through. So I'm just pinching that yarn as tightly as I can, and I've come out under this spoke. I'm just going to slide my needle down that ridge along that spoke. So I'm just, where the thread is wrapped over the top of the spoke, I'm just sliding my needle down inside that and just using my thumb to support those wraps. I don't want to distort them, so I'm pressing quite tightly with my thumb and I'm just pulling that yarn end through, and I want to pull it until it hasn't got any slack on it, like that. And then I'm going to get my scissors and go as close to the spoke as I can without cutting it, and I'm going to snip that thread end off. Now that looks a little bit lumpy, it won't, I promise you. Right, let's get some of this wool, this actual wool. And we're going to do the same process again, but I'm going to go up the set of spokes next to the one that I just went down. So I went down this one here, I'm going to go up the one back from it. So the last one that my previous yarn had wrapped over. Just wiggling it a little bit. This is not acrylic, so it's more fibrous, so it's a little bit trickier to get started, but it's not giving me any trouble now. It's on its way. So I'm just going to pull that Don't pull too hard, go gently until the end disappears. Then I can get rid of that sharp needle. I don't want a sharp needle because I don't want to be piercing the fibres as I'm weaving. So I went over this spoke. I want to go under the next one with my new colour, and then back over it and underneath and under two, and I just carry on like nothing happened. And you see that wrap that we've just put in fills the gap left by the previous thread, and so it goes back to being circular. And I'm just going to carry on like that. So I'm going to finish off wrapping my sunflower centre, and then I'll come back and show you the next stage. Right, so that is my whipped wheel. It's nice and chunky. I put some of that stranded yarn around the edge, and that's gone really nice and fluffy. And you can see I've just got out a bunch of beads from my neutral collection. I've also got some just pure kind of glass crystal beads. I might put those in as well. So what we want to do is create some little drops of sap that we often see at the centre of sunflowers. I've just got some of that brown thread that I used for the spokes, knotted the end. I'm going to come up from the back, catch a bead, and then I'm going to hop over one of the threads around the wheel and go back down. And if you want to, you can be really random with this, you can be quite haphazard, or you could make little rings of beads. It's entirely up to you. So I'm just catching a bead. I've got a couple of rogue giant beads in there, just catching a bead on my needle and stitching it in, and you can see already we're starting to get a little bit of shine at the centre. I know it's hard to see. So whatever beads you've got, we just want to create a sense of this being covered in sap, ready for the bees to come and feast, and the birds as well, who often like to pick out sunflower seeds. I've got some really chunky glass beads here that I think look really nice. So hopefully you can see a little bit of shimmer there catching the light. So I'm going to carry on and add more beads, and then I'll come back and show you the next stage. So here's my flower centre with the beads on. I'm picking up lots of shine in unexpected places, so places where you can't actually see beads. Every now and again they'll catch the light and catch your eye. I really like these clear beads. Wasn't sure how they would look, but I actually really like them. So what I'm doing now is just running stitching around that circle that I drew, because we're going to take this out of the hoop and trim it back, and I'm doing this while it's still in the hoop because I don't want to change the tension of the fabric before I've stitched it. So this is like I suppose you would call it like a stay stitch, where we're just holding the shape a little bit. Because the linen isn't a really tight weave, it's not what I call a loose weave, but it's not like cotton, quilting cotton or anything like that. So I just want to make sure that we don't get any distortion. I might be being overcautious, but better safe than sorry. There we go. So I hope you can see those stitches around the edge, and now we're going to loosen up the hoop. I think I did this with a screwdriver, so I hope I can. I can't. Hang on a second. Here we go. Can't do it with my hand. Who knew screwdrivers were important for embroidery? Okay, so what I want to do with that stay stitching, I'm just going to catch my needle underneath the back there, try and keep the thread out of the way. I want to trim this back, so I'm going to trim it to just inside where the hoop was, and the fabric's creased, so it's easy to work out where I need to go. So you don't have to be mega precise with this, it's no big deal. We're going to just snip now. So I've got those stay stitches in. I want to snip every couple of centimetres, and I want to snip up to those stitches but not into them. So I absolutely need to not cut those stitches, because otherwise our fabric's going to fray and the spokes won't hold. So you need to make sure you're not going across those stitches or into the spokes. So I'm trying to cut in between my spoke markers because I know there's not a thread there. I've come a bit close a couple of times, but I think I'm okay. Let's have one more. There we go. Because we're going to fold this back on itself. So I've got my thread again, and this does not need to be super neat, it's all going to be covered up. So I want to fold back my tab and just put a little holding stitch in it. Fold back my tab, put a little holding stitch. So fold back the next tab and catch it with a stitch. So we're just turning under the excess fabric, and this is going to help us be able to applique this onto our background, but we're not going to do that just yet. So that's our sunflower centre. Let's bring our slow stitch back in. So I think I'm going to put this around about here, and so what I want is a little offcut of card or paper. Just got a little post-it note here, and I want to sketch a petal shape. Let's turn it over so it's not off-putting. I want to sketch a petal shape that's going to be about the right size. So I want something like that. I think that's going to work. We're going to extend it down a little bit because we need a little tab, and that's going to be our template. So all I've done is 2 curved lines like that. You can do it symmetrically, but you might be better having it a little bit wobbly, more curved on one side than the other, because I think it's going to make it look more natural. So we've got our little template. There we go, and we're going to use this to make some petals for our sunflower. So I'm going to start with some felt. Felt is a fabulous fabric to work with because it doesn't fray. There's going to be no issues with this. So this is going to help us get our eye in. Let's cut a few of these. So I'm just going to draw around that template. Again, you don't have to be especially precise because you don't want all your petals to be exactly the same. Let's start with 3. So I'm going to cut those out. If you want to stitch on these, you can. I'm not going to. Let's place our centre. I'm going to put it there, and I'm just going to draw around it roughly. That'll do. So going to pop on my petals, tuck them inside that circle. I've just got some of the yellow left in my needle from last week, from when I was seed stitching, and I'm just going to put a couple of stitches I know this is overlapping, it doesn't matter. In fact, I quite like it. So a couple of stitches, and I'm going to place the other petals somewhere like that, stitch those on. What else have we got? Now I've got some of this tweedy fabric. This will fray really badly, so there's a couple of things that you could do. You could either put some bondweb on the back, and that will hold it a little bit. You can blanket stitch around the edge, and that will also hold it. Can't say that. Let's work on the back. That might be a bit better. I might need a hard surface as well. Let's get my quilting ruler out. That might help. Yep, there we go. I'm going to do something slightly different to stop mine fraying. It's quite nice as well sometimes to flip your template over, because if you do have a slightly asymmetrical template, it means that your petals won't all be curving or bending in the same direction. Okay, so I've got a bit of this brown thread, and what I'm going to do is just stitch just inside that line. So I'm making sure I'm going all the way through the fabric, and just like we did around the centre of the flower, I'm putting in a kind of stay stitch. Now I'm working from the back here. It shows a little bit on the front, but not too badly. Now I'm hoping that this will allow it to fray a little bit, but the stitching will hold it. So I don't mind a bit of fraying, I would encourage it, but I don't want it to completely shred. The other thing that you can do is just put some fabric glue on the back. I might do that as well, actually, just to help it. You can use fray stop, I don't have any of that. You could use spray based, we've used that a little bit, so I do have that, but I don't like how messy it is, so I'm not going to use that. Wrong scissors, that'll do. So you get a little bit of your fabric glue and just draw around the edge with it. Pritt stick would work. Don't be alarmed by the garish fluorescent yellow. It dries white. So I'm going to stitch the other two and let the glue dry before I cut that out, and then I'll come back and show you what's next. Thought I'd just dive back in. I've made some corduroy petals and I've deliberately cut the petals from different angles on the corduroy. So I've got a couple that are straight, and then I've got one where the lines of the corduroy are going diagonally across the petal, and these are dry now. So I'm going to get my scissors and I'm just going to go just outside the stitching line, which is now quite hard to see, but I can see it just well enough. So just outside the stitching line, and I am hoping that that's going to just hold that fabric so that it doesn't fray too badly. Another thing that you can do is stitch these onto a backing fabric, so like the offcuts of the linen that we've stitched on to make our middle, or you could iron on some interfacing. Just some lightweight interfacing would work. I kind of want them to be double-sided because we're only going to stitch these down at the centre. I'm not going to stitch down the actual petals, so I reckon I need 3 more. So I'm going to find another fabric and cut 3 more petals, and then we'll construct our sunflower. Okay, here we go. So we're just going to, I've got all my petals here. I've stitched on the first one and I do want them to overlap, so I'm just going to pop my next one on there and catch that down with a couple of stitches. We're going to applique on the centre, so you don't need to worry too much about how many stitches are on it because there will be more. Now what you can do is gather the petal a little bit if you want to, and that will make them sit proud of the surface, so it will make the petal curl forward. Hopefully you can see that. Let's get a different type of petal. So just a few stitches to hold it in place. Like that. Let's have another felt one. You can alternate them. I'm not going to. I want to keep it a bit more random. Sure, if you do gather, you're only gathering the petal and not the background, because you don't want to distort it too much. So I'll pop another one on. Let's just make sure these are all going to be enough to surround. Worried I might need another couple. No, I think I'm going to be alright. Oh, doesn't it look lovely? So hopefully you can see now why I didn't want to overdo the stitching last week. I wanted to keep a space where there wasn't a lot of stitching so that I could house my sunflower, and because the petals are going to be loose, we will be able to see that fabric underneath. So I think it's working quite nicely. Now, if you do like sunflowers, if you have a look on our website, there is a link in the description below. We actually have quite a selection of sunflower projects. So we have the sunflower garland that I mentioned in a Wednesday video a month or so ago. We also have a book sleeve that is based around sunflowers, and I'm going to do a what's in the box video about that on Wednesday, so you'll be able to see the contents of that kit. And what else have we got? We've got a PDF download or two, so you can download the sunflower garland as a PDF if you don't want to ship the kit. We also have a sunflower brooch, which is super cheap, which is a little scrappy fabric project, similar to this but not quite. So that's available as a download. And we also have a folk art sunflower hoop that has actually got 3 different ways of creating it. So there's a 70s style version, a scrappy fabric version, and a normal sort of standard gold sunflower version, and that's available as a PDF as well. We don't do that one as a kit, so that's only available as a PDF. So worth having a look if you are a fan of sunflowers, because there's something there pretty much for everybody. Like that. Oh, how fab. Love it. And I can still see all of my fabrics underneath. I really like that. So this is what we're going to do now. We're just going to applique on our centre. Oh, love it. Look at that. Right, I'm just going to pop a pin or two to hold this centrally, because I find that when I stitch in a circle, things tend to move, and we could end up, help if I went through the actual backing fabric, wouldn't it? Yeah, things can move and we could end up with our centre being over here somewhere. So I've just threaded up 2 strands. It's just stranded cotton. I'm going to keep my thumb at the centre, and I'm going to come up through all the layers at the back. You've got some choices here. You could do an applique stitch, or you could blanket stitch it. I'm going to do an applique stitch, and I'm just going to use my needle to turn under any excess fabric. So I'm coming up through all the layers, including that backing fabric, the backing linen that we started on, and then I'm tucking my needle right in against that linen and going down just through the petals and the backing fabric, and then I'll move around a little way, come up through all the layers including the linen, and then tuck against the edge and come back down just through the petals and the backing fabric. So up through everything, down, tucked right up against the edge, and I'm just going to work all the way around like that. So there we have our sunflower. Oh, I love it. So when we bind it, we will bind it underneath those petals, so this might encroach on the panel above it or just into the border, but I think that's really lovely. So that's our addition for this week, a scrappy textured sunflower with a whipped wheel in the centre. Oh, makes me so happy. So, hope you've enjoyed that. If you have, please do give this video a like, and if you want more videos like this, you can also hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, and then you'll never miss an upload. Don't forget to share your work. You can use our private Facebook group, and there's a link to that in the description below, or if you're sharing on Instagram, use hashtag FSHwingingit24, and that gathers all of the pieces from this year's project into one place, and you can have a look at what everybody else is making. I'll link another floral video over here, and I'll put the whole playlist for Winging It 2024 down here so that you can watch everything in this series. Have a fab week making your Scrappy Sunflower, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!